Hi friends, welcome back to another monthly wrap-up, and it is currently November 30th. When you see this will probably be like the first week of December. If it's the first week of December, Merry Christmas. Today we're going to be wrapping up the 8 books I read in November, and while I was actually going through this list yesterday and I was like writing down my thoughts and stuff on all these books, I was like, I had a great reading month. And I did read a little bit less than I usually do, but I think that was because one of the audiobooks I listened to was so long. It was like 21 hours, but that is besides the point because I had multiple 5-star books this month. And when I say multiple, I mean like 3 out of 8, which is insanity. Let's just get into it because I'm really excited to talk about everything that I read. I think I'm going to do this the same way I did it last month, but I'm going to very loosely touch on the books that were in other videos. So the reading vlog that I posted last week, I think had 4 books. So 4 of those I'll just like lightly touch on because you guys already know my thoughts on those, but I'm going to include them because I did indeed read them this month. But let's get into it because there have been so many good books this month. The sun is playing hide and seek behind the clouds, so hopefully, fingers crossed, the lighting will be somewhat consistent throughout this whole video. But the first book I read was The Dagger and the Flame by Catherine Doyle, and I got this as a Book of the Month book. So much thicker than I thought it would be, which is probably why it contributed to the 3.5 star. But it wasn't what I was expecting, and I was really excited for it. The way that it was described as like, if you like Stephanie Garber or the Throne of Glass series, like that, it didn't really, I don't think it was overhyped because I wasn't expecting much, but it wasn't my favorite fantasy in the world, which is fine because reading's subjective. But I feel like it dragged on quite a bit and the pacing just wasn't what I was expecting it to be. It's about 2 somewhat rival gangs. One of the gangs is a group of assassins and the other gang is a gang of thieves. And they vow to they live in the same city and they operate in the same city, but they vow to never get in each other's way, sort of thing. It also is kind of giving me These Violent Delights, like that kind of vibe, because they were also 2 rival gangs. But it was also kind of giving me Romeo and Juliet vibes, kind of, because the 2 people from rival gangs, it's enemies to lovers. So one of the assassins is given, he's given a hit, and the hit is basically the girl in the gang of thieves, and they're basically enemies because he wants to kill her. But then they actually have to team up because there are these new monster creatures that came into the city and now they're attacking everyone, so they have to work together and try and find out where these monsters came from and how to stop them. And then it spirals into enemies to lovers, and you can kind of just pick up where it goes from there. What was this? Oh my gosh. I think I had the idea of something like Once Upon a Broken Heart or Caraval, and that wasn't what I got from this. I see where they're coming from, but those just weren't the vibes I was getting. Still good, just very thicker than I thought it would be. The Games That Gods Play was a 5 out of 5 star book, and dare I say maybe a god tier book. If I could, I would rate it a 6 out of 5. And that was actually an audiobook, which is really interesting because I think I've mentioned before, but I just don't rate audiobooks as high as I feel if I were to read them in person, because not that there's a disconnect, but I think I enjoy holding a physical book in my hand and reading over listening to a book, which blows my mind that this was a 5 out of 5 star. I don't think I've rated an audiobook higher than a 3.5, so do with that what you will. I've come to realize from this, The Games That Gods Play and Fourth Wing, that those 2 have been 5 out of 5 god tier books. The correlation that I've kind of realized is that they're both somewhat nostalgic, remind me of other books that I read in my childhood that I really liked. A mix between The Hunger Games and Percy Jackson. And I think I read the original Percy Jackson series. I know that they're kind of spin-off series, but I haven't read those. I just read the Percy Jackson series. It is about the 12 Greek gods, and I don't know if it's every 100 years, every couple years, as if 100 years is a couple of years, they have a big competition amongst the gods. So the 12 gods choose a champion, which is a human, and they compete in trials created by each god. So like Zeus would create a trial, Hermes would create a trial, and like all of the humans compete, and whatever champion wins for their god, and then that god gets to be king of the gods for the next 100 years until they have like the trial again. This year is interesting though, because Hades decides to compete in the trial. He hasn't competed like ever, so everyone's kind of like, why are you here? Like something suspicious is going on if you want to compete in the trial. And this is also very known to the human world. Like it's a big like spectacle when people get chosen to be these gods champions. Like it's on the news, like they're well aware. So Hades ends up picking this girl named Lyra, and she was cursed by Zeus when she was a baby to be unlovable. Her parents ended up giving her up. She has no friends. She's like had crushes, but no one's ever been in love with her because she's cursed to be unlovable by Zeus. And Hades ends up picking her to be his champion, and she's like, well, what the heck, why? So now she's competing in all of these trials with other humans who some eventually become her friends, but it's also kind of like it is a romantasy, but it's so much more. The audiobook was amazing. It was also like diverse in the sense that they chose champions from all over the world. They chose a champion from Canada, and she was like the rudest person in the world in the book, and I was like, this is actually so funny because Canadians have the stereotype of being like super nice. I also have to say that I had no clue this book was the first book in a series, because we are getting to the end and I was like, oh, this is gonna wrap up like so nicely, I'm gonna be so happy. The cliffhanger, oh my god, I was like, wait, what? And then I had to do some research, and then I realized it's the first book in a series. So really got myself on that one, but you already know I'm going to be reading the whole series when it comes out. I will not stop raving about this book. I put it on my Christmas list. I want like a physical copy because it will be like my trophy. Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver was also a 5-star book, which I wasn't expecting, but I did love the first book of the series, Wild Love. I did love that, so that's why I decided to pick this one up. But the way that this dealt with like healing your inner child, it healed a little bit of me, I'm not gonna lie. A lot of my thoughts and what I say on this book are in last week's video, but this kind of just solidifies my love for Elsie Silver. She writes strong women, like women who won't take shit from anyone, and I love it. And even though they're strong and they're very independent, they're also working on themselves and healing, and I just, oh my god, I love it. I love it. Wild Eyes is about Skylar, who is a very famous pop singer who decides that life is just not for her. She needs a break. There's like something very public that happened, and she realized everyone close to her was lying and like broke her trust. It was just not a great situation. So she ends up leaving LA and going to Rose Hill as like a little getaway. She wants to record a new album with Ford, who is the male main character from Wild Love, so that's why she comes to Rose Hill, and she befriends Wes. She ends up living in Wes's bunkhouse on his property, and from there she heals herself and she learns to slow down, and she befriends like his kids, and oh my god, it's such a good story. Please read it. If you go on Spotify, you can listen to the songs that are mentioned in this book. Amazing experience. 10 out of 10 experience. A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid was a 3.5 star. I think it was Dark Academia. Wasn't my favorite, but that doesn't mean I'm going to put off Dark Academia forever. I just don't think that I was in the right headspace for this book, I guess. The ending of this book did really get me because I was reading it until like I think 11:30 at night, and I couldn't go to sleep after because like the suspenseful climax of it all, my heart was beating, and like she got me there. She really did. But I just don't think the story was for me. So this book was about Effie, and she ends up leaving her architecture school and going to work on a project for this man who is the son of like one of her, or like of her idol. Her idol was an author, poet who ended up passing away, so his son put out a call to her architecture university and being like, I want someone to rebuild my dad's house. So she goes, and it's just like weird vibes. Like something's off with like the sun and the house and the land in general, and she ends up befriending another student who is also working there, working on like a biography somewhat of the life of this man's very famous dad. So they end up working together because they're like, something's off, something's like not right. So they start uncovering all these secrets and mysteries. Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross was an unexpected 5-star because I didn't plan on picking this up this year. It was on my physical TBR and I was like, yeah, I should probably read it before the end of the year, and thank God I did. I think it was the atmosphere in this guy. Like the atmosphere in this book, even though it was during like a very war-torn time, like a fictional war, I feel like it was a book that flew under my radar that I didn't really expect to love or like want to. It wasn't like Fourth Wing where it was super hyped up where I was like, oh, I need to read it. But I'm so glad that I did, because this is just so beautiful. Like the writing in this is so beautiful, the story is so beautiful. A lot of the quotes in here reminded me of my boyfriend, and I feel like that's another reason why I loved it so much. This book is about Iris, and her brother leaves to go off to war to fight for one of the gods. The war is between gods, so he goes off to fight for a god, and work is going not great. Like something happens in the beginning of the book that makes her quit her job, and she's like, I can't be here, I want to go find my brother. So she signs up to be a war correspondent, and she goes to somewhat of the front lines, and she befriends like another war correspondent and the owner of a B&B, and that's like where the found family comes in. And then someone from her office where she used to work, she worked for a newspaper, I think, he was like her rival, Divine Rivals, and he ends up leaving the office to follow her to go to the front lines because he was like, oh my gosh, like, no, she can't leave, like, no. So he follows her, and it's just like, it's literally like magical pen pals because they both have like magical typewriters and like send letters back and forth, and it's just the cutest thing in the friggin' world. I can't wait to continue the series and read the next book, and I do have that on hold at the library too because I need to get my hands on it, and I need to finish the story because the cliffhanger in this really made me mad because I wasn't expecting the cliffhanger. A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston was one of my unexpected 4-star books because I didn't think I was gonna love it as much as I did, and that is because of all of the mixed reviews I've seen on TikTok and YouTube. And I do understand the negative reviews and the mixed reviews. So everyone's like ripe with this book was that they said the romance wasn't there. Like it was just a big switch between the beginning and the end of or like the back half of the book, because in the beginning there was like no chemistry whatsoever, and in the middle there's like someone snapped their fingers and all of a sudden there was something there. Like I do understand it, but guys, I said this in last week's video too, give me a small town and a bookstore and I'm the happiest girl in the world, okay? I loved the concept that she was in her favorite book series. Please, if like literally just thinking about that makes my mind so happy and like makes me so giddy, because I was like, if I could be in the story of my favorite book, I really don't know what I would do. It would probably be not as great of a situation as this, because my favorite book would probably be like some dystopian world where like there's war and things are going to shit, but we don't think about it. The idea just excites me. Oh, this was a fun time. This really was, and I think my expectations of this were so low that reading it, I was like, oh, this actually isn't as bad as everyone's saying. Like, I actually kind of really like this. This book follows Elsie, and she's going through it. She's had a rough year, and she was looking forward to her book club's cottage trip, where they literally rent a cottage for a weekend and they go up and just read books. Everyone ended up canceling on her this year. She's like, no, I'm gonna go up by myself because I need this. So she goes up and ends up stumbling into her favorite book town, like the town of her favorite book, and she's like, how'd I get here? This is fiction. So she goes around, she's like meeting all of her favorite characters, but they don't know they're in a book, which is like kind of fun. And then she meets Anders, and Anders was not in the series, so she's like, who the hell are you? Like, why are you here? So the story goes from there. Ashley Poston she really got me thinking about opening up my own bookstore. Okay, let me just say that. But that's another conversation for another day. This is for all you besties who told me to keep reading ACOTAR even though I didn't love A Court of Thorns and Roses. So this month I did listen to A Court of Mist and Fury, and I gave it a 3.75, which is higher than my review of ACOTAR, which was a 3, I think. Really thinking about it, I think it should be a 2.5. Don't come at me, please. I just don't think that this series is for me. Let me start with the positives first, because I loved this book so much more than ACOTAR. Like, it was so much better. And I get the hype with Velaris because I do want to live there. I do indeed. Like, the atmosphere, like the vibes there just seem amazing, immaculate, if you will. I get it. I get that hype. Like, I do. That just seems like the best place to be, honestly. I just don't think it's for me, and I think that's because, like, it's very heavy on, like, the romance. And I think I was expecting a little bit more fantasy, which is definitely on me, because when I do watch what people say about, like, this series compared to Throne of Glass, they're like, no, this is definitely more romantasy, and Throne of Glass is more of, like, a fantasy romance as, like, a subplot. So that's definitely on me. At times I was just cringing a little, and I was like, eee. The concept and the story are definitely, like, picking up much more than, like, the first book, but, like, there are just some things that I can't get over. Like, I'm not gonna say it because I don't want to spoil it, but it was, like, towards the end of the book. It was when they're meeting, like, the king, and, like, the sisters were there. It was that's all I'm gonna say. Everyone was right. It is so much better than ACOTAR, but also my, like, thinking in that is, why do I have to get through one book for it to get better? Like, shouldn't it be good from the start to keep me intrigued, sort of thing? Like, I don't know. These are just, like, my thoughts and opinions. When I tell you that I was not ready for the emotional damage that came with this book, like, oh my god. I gave it a 4.75 out of 5 stars because I didn't get the 5-star feeling. And I think a lot of people can agree with me when I say that, like, 5 stars is a feeling. 6 stars is a feeling and emotional distraught. So it was a 4.5. I was emotionally distraught, I will say that. But this was not what I was expecting in the best possible way. And the way that I was so focused on the reading order, and no one prepped me for, like, how I would feel after reading this, is, like, it got me a little bit. I love this so much more than ACOTAR, and I think that was probably just because, like, when I say the pacing in this book is insane, like, there's never a dull moment. Fast-paced books are so fun to get through, and the way that I didn't want to finish this, like, probably for the last 3 days, I finished this yesterday, for the past, like, 4 days, I was just reading, like, 10 pages at the end, or, like, 10 pages to the end, because I didn't want it to end. I was like, I can't do this, because I had an inkling. I was like, I feel like something bad's gonna happen, and I think I know what that thing is, so I don't want to read the end. I don't want to get to that part. So I was just putting it off. I think I probably could have finished this book in 3 days. I finished it in, like, 7, because I didn't want it to end. I didn't want that thing to happen. And then when it did happen, my heart broke. My stomach, like, sank, dropped. Oh my god. Like, the ending of this book destroyed me. Like, I wasn't ready for it. And the quote, my favorite quote in this book, is on the last page, and I can't explicitly read it because it will be spoiling something, and it broke me. I read that and I was like, oh, I'm gonna be out of it for a little bit. I need to emotionally recover for a little bit. I don't really know if I should tell you what this is about, purely based on the fact that people read this series in so many different orders. I read this first. I know some people read this fourth. So I don't think I'm gonna tell you what it's about. Just like A Court of Mist and Fury is the second book in a series, so I'm definitely not telling you what that's about. The gist of this, from what I can understand, if people read this, like, not in the order that I'm reading it, is it's the prequel to the series of Throne of Glass. And it's kind of like giving her history of her adventures, I would say, leading up to her being in the mines, which was so much fun. I know that it's like a compilation of short stories, but I loved it. It felt like a big story, just like with different chapters. I adored it, and I'm so excited to start this series. Like, I'm so excited. I get the hype, and now I just want to binge. I want to binge all of them, and I'm so glad that I have at least the first 4 to binge. Here are November's books plus the 2 audio ones I listened to. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I had a great time as always. And again, Merry Christmas, because it's Christmas time to me now. But I will see you guys in next week's video, which I think is going to be a fun little getting ready for Christmas vlog. And then I have some other Christmassy themed videos for after that, because boy do I love Christmas. But I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye guys!